So we have with us today Dr. Beth McLean. She is an assistant teaching professor for the Goodling Institute for Research and Family Literacy at Penn State. And she is a consultant with the National Center on Improving Literacy, or NCIL. So Dr. McLean, thanks so much for being here. We so very much appreciate your time. Oh, before we start, just in case y'all lose me because our weather is atrocious down here today, we do have a couple of other co-hosts. Should something happen and we all get knocked off, please reactivate and come back on the Zoom because I will be doing it from my phone if that happens. So, Dr. McLean, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Good morning. I'm really pleased to be here and to be talking about supporting your child's literacy development in preschool. NCIL's mission is to increase access to and use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach pre-K to grade 12 students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today also can be related to younger children from birth to 4, birth to 3 years of age, because what we want to do is start from very beginning to interact with kids, with their children. Okay. So our learning objectives today are to increase our awareness of evidence-based practices to support children's literacy development, provide ideas for parents to support their children's language and literacy growth. And this is we're going to talk about all these things: talking together, engaging in conversations, helping children recognize speech sounds and identify letter sound relationships, fostering children's interest in reading and interest in engagement in reading, and developing listening and reading comprehension skills. All of these things are fundamental to learning to read and write. And as Sharon said, please feel free to ask a question in the chat. I believe Sharon's monitoring that because I'm not I'm not really looking at them. So please let me know if someone asks a question as we go through. So this is the table of contents. First, we're going to talk about talking with your child. Then we're going to talk about helping your child with speech and sound letters, because again, this is kind of foundational. And then we're going to talk about book reading, and all of these are pieces that you use to kind of foster and talk. When you talk with children, you help them with their speech sounds as you're reading books. So all of these things help fluency and comprehension as children grow older, so. All right, so my first topic is talking with your child. And this is my favorite. And because I think this is really, really important. It helps your children learn about letters and letter sounds, and learn new words and ideas, practice hearing and saying words, and practice talking back and forth. So when you practice back and forth, you're learning conversational nuances, you're listening to the new sounds and words, which are part of the sounds are part of what words are, and phonological awareness, which we're going to get to. So all of this is the beginning of children beginning and learning how to read and write. So talking with your child, and this is truly talk with your child all the time, regardless of age. So even if it's a birth, your child's birth to 5, birth to 3, you still want to be talking all the time, because during this time they're learning new words, vocabulary, they're talking, learning just the foundations of what it is and what words mean and what words are going to be. So you talk all the time when you're engaging in pretend play, and there's more informal ways, which are like talking in the grocery store. Hey, look at the apple, that is red. This is starts with the letter A. Discuss things while you see in the car. Just discuss the shapes of signs, discuss the colors, discuss what you see. All of these will introduce your child to new vocabulary words, which again, if you don't have the vocabulary words, you're not going to be able to comprehend what you read and what you learn. And you talk about letters, make up silly rhymes, create stories together, which you can do. I mean, you see a stop sign. What rhymes with stop? Pop, lop, cop. You can say any word you want because it still has the sounds of the words. So in learning to talk, as we just said, is the foundation. So it's very important to keep the conversations going. And if you think of a birth to 3-year-old child, you think of, well, talk all the time while you're changing their diaper or while you're feeding them. Always have a conversation going so that they get that piece of what they're doing. All right, so, okay. So when you talk with your child, there are things called thick and thin conversations. So a thick conversations are when you extend the conversation more, back and forth exchanges between the adult and the child. So they get more complex, it adds more words, more vocabularies, and you're pointing out different things. So what you're doing is you're pointing out, as it says, appropriate conversation skills, the whole talking back and forth and listening, not just talking all the time, but you pause and you listen to what the child has to say. It supports complex thinking because you're introducing new concepts and new skills and new ideas. It helps to make connections to what children already know, excuse me, and this builds knowledge, and we need to build knowledge for later on, for the comprehension of what we read, so that it's understandable and you know what it is, and they can make connections to their life and what is going on in their world. And as the most important, increases vocabulary and expands language. Without vocabulary, without knowledge of words, it's more difficult to learn to read and more difficult to comprehend what you read. So this is really important. So we're going to watch a short video made from Head Start. And this is where it's tricky, if I can get us to that spot. All right, I'm hoping everybody can see this, and we're going to watch this for probably about a minute, minute and a half or so. And it talks about thick and thin conversations.
What's a thick conversation? What's a thin one? Let's take a moment and listen to a thin conversation.
1 circle, 2. What else do you need? Are you putting hair in your snowman? Yeah. Wow. What else do you need? Alden, where's your snowman? Snow girl. Or is it a snow girl? What are those? Oh.
Now, let's listen to a thick conversation.
Get all kinds of snow. Oh, you make snow on the ground. Oh, maybe we can make a shimmy. You think? Does it stay warm? Are you gonna make it? Let's see. Show me. All done? Oh, you think up here on the top? Can you make it up there? Okay, that's. Oh no! How come my house got snowed? All around on the top on the roof. Oh, when are they gonna be able to go outside and play? Do you think? It's not. Oh, you're snowing me in. What are we gonna do inside the house?
Hear the difference? Thick conversations have many back and forth exchanges between the adult and the child. Thick conversations have lots of opportunities for children to hear and use a variety of words and sentences. In thick conversations, adults respond to children's interests and ideas and help to expand on their understanding and help children develop new knowledge. And in thick conversations, adults help children engage in more complex thinking by encouraging children to explain their thinking and make connections.
All right. Go back to the PowerPoint. Did it go back? I think it did. Hold on.
It did. You're back on the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. It's hard, lots of screens. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to make it a large screen when we started out, but I clued in halfway through. So those are some ideas about the thick and thin conversations, and they're really important because I like we talked about, it expands what's going on instead of just a kind of a two-dimensional conversation. It allows a little more complex thinking and ideas to go on. So, excuse me. So when you talk with your child, there are strategies for thick conversations. There are different ways to do it. And we're going to have the next slide will have a bunch of resources, and they have the resources about how to do these thick conversations. Asking questions, expanding, novel words. So that'll be when you'll have the length. But if you try these strategies, you can ask, the WH questions: who, what, where, when, and why. And those are very open-ended type questions where you can really expand on what it is. And you can encourage, all different kinds of conversations. When you repeat all or part of your child's answer to encourage him to say more. And it's not necessarily to correct the child, it's just kind of say, or if they say something wrong, you kind of expand upon it and just repeat it, but saying the correct answer. And I'll probably say that again in a bit. And then you give more and new information about a particular topic so that they, again, expands it, makes it more information about it and what's happening. So it's kind of just giving new information, providing, just going in all directions, and it's a fun way to keep it going. And you can do this again when you're talking with your child, not just during reading, but when you're out and about and have conversations in the grocery store. Why do you think, I don't know, do you think, I can't even think of it right now, but just questions that are open-ended. And here is a bunch of resources. You can also get these on the NCIL website, but it's resources that fit with talking with your child, engaging in conversations. And it's kind of a tip sheet to go and take it out with you. You could take it with you as a reminder, a tip sheet about thick and thin conversations, kind of working at home and doing things at home, like labeling things and talking about it, but there are lots of different strategies. Are there any questions at this point? I'm going to go on to the next topic, and I do speak quickly, so I hope it's okay.
There aren't any in the chat yet.
Okay, great. Then we'll move on. Okay, so the next piece is helping your child with speech sounds and letters. And this is really, again, the foundation and piece of learning to read and write, because they help the child learn how language works. You learn the letters of what the sounds, letters that relate to the spoken words, and you link letters to their sounds and read works, read words later and support comprehension. And that's really what happens and what's important. Now, children don't just naturally learn the sounds of words. I mean, it has to be kind of a little bit of a methodical teaching what the sounds are. It's not like it's, natural behavior and what we, as we grow and things, we naturally learn how to read. It is a matter of, teaching and supporting and providing ideas for continuing in the skill development for learning to read and write. So how can we help the child learn speech sounds and letters? And there's so many different ways, but one of my favorites is noticing rhymes. When you notice rhymes, it shows how the language works. And rhymes are words that sound the same when spoken. And I remember, when I would drive around with my children, we would be making silly rhyme words all the time. We'd see a word, we'd see something, and then we'd make a silly rhyme with it. So it was a really good way to get that phonological awareness development. So what can you do? You can sing or listen to nursery rhymes. They're found in poetry and songs and many children's books and games, for example, like Jack and Jill, Humpty Dumpty, Baba Black Sheep. There are so many different ways, but sometimes I think we don't focus on nursery rhymes as much as we should, because these are an easy way to learn the different nuances and sounds of spoken letters and words, and singing them as well. So it's a really, really good way to do it. You could read rhyming books. Most young children's books have rhyming words. A lot of them do. And you can also go to your librarian and local library and ask to find books with rhyming words to help foster this skill. And then there's always the rhyming games, which I did a lot with my kids because it's fun. And you can match things that rhyme. Find objects around the house that rhyme with one another, or just say a real word and make up a silly rhyme for it. It's just a fun way to do it. If you want to put in the chat, if you have any nursery rhymes or rhyming songs that that are that you really like and you think are good for development of the kind of the phonological awareness and the sounds. So I don't know if any, but I know there are some really good children's books with it and poetry. And there are some the poetry can be kind of poetry is a really good thing to expose to because it's kind of new and kids don't always have an exposure to poetry. So it's really fun. And how you can help them write poetry where you're, try to figure out rhyming words and just, say, hey, we see a tree, let's make a poem about a tree and rhyme all the words. So there's lots of different ways to do it. And we're talking a lot about the speech sounds, but it's also, you can write and help them see the pieces to it too. Anything in the chat, Sharon, about rhyming?
So far, just from me. I put anything Dr. Seuss.
Oh, yes.
Shel Silverstein is one of my favorites. Some of his things are poems that rhyme.
Yes. Yep.
Songs, Raffi Down by the Bay.
Oh my gosh, I love Rafferty. We would have the audio. We would have I know, old school. We had the CDs and played them in the car all the time. So,
Right.
yes. Yep. Down by the Bay. Yes.
We
So,
also did, my daughter loved the Chicka Chicka Chicka
Yep.
Boom Boom book.
Right.
And we actually memorized that and used to just say it on our walks, when she was little. So that, anything, it's so easy to memorize, so she was
Yep.
memorizing nursery rhymes when she was really little.
Yes, and it is easy, and then you can keep doing it repetitively. Kids like a lot of repetitive things, so that's a great way to do it. And then to add, once you know it by heart, you can add silly words to it and make up different things. But I'm glad you brought up Raffi. That's one of my favorites, and I think
Oh, and someone put in the chat, I think that's Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but are you thinking Willoughby Wallaby Woo?
oh
Elephant
yes,
sat on you, Willoughby Wallaby Wee, and elephant sat on me. And then you can make silly rhymes with their names.
yep, yep.
The name game is another one that kind of is a goofy rhyming game. Hop on Pop is a good
Yep.
Dr. Seuss-ish. I don't know if it was legitimately Dr. Seuss, but it's one of those in that line. Hey,
It is
Billy
one of those.
Diddle, a lot of the different Dr. Seuss books have, crazy rhymes in them that are fun.
They are, and they're made up words, which makes it even more fun to me. I mean, because it just shows that you don't have to have the real words to have fun with rhyming and things. So, well, thank you. That's great. And kind of, we just talked about this a second ago, using alphabet toys, and I was thinking of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom to make the letter sound learning exciting, making it fun. You can do letter blocks, magnetic letters, alphabet puzzles, letter stamps. I remember we used to have magnetic letters and had them on the refrigerator, and then we could do different things. But you can also make letters shapes with Play-Doh and bath bubbles, chalk or paper, and talk about the sounds and what the letters are. And that really helps, like it says, the early reading success. And then the singing of songs, kind of like the singing of nursery rhymes. You have bingo, B-I-N-G-O, which is always fun. Or games like I Spy. We played I Spy while we were driving. We were in the house. We would do it at dinner. We would do it all the time. I Spy something that starts with the letter F, and then you have to try to find, find what that letter might be. So it makes it just kind of a fun way to do all these and to provide the foundational support for learning to read and write. So that's what's fun. And then encourage interest in letters and their sounds, and put the letters, let your child tell you the letters in his or her name, familiar letters that they might see, or say letter sounds. Like I said, you could label around the house and talk about what those letters are. So there's the written and sound correspondence, encouraging that. So there's lots of different ways to do it. But, as I said, I want to reemphasize that this learning the sounds of letters and phonological awareness, which is called, is the foundation for learning to read and write. Because children who struggle with the phonological awareness tend to be further behind in their reading skill development in 3rd and 4th grade. So this is a really fundamental piece that's super important. And if you see that your child has problems with phonological awareness and continues to as they grow up, then, this is an indicator of possible, issues or dyslexia or something, which is no big deal, but it's good to know what's going on with your child so that you can be more supportive of them and help them out as they go through their learning journey. So, All right. And then here's some resources related to helping your child with speech and sounds. And then, so here is, tune up in the community, and that's about how you work with the community and as you're going around and you use the community words in the community to help you. There's a, excuse me, an example of a phonological awareness game, which is a rhyming game, and there's also a Spanish version of it. And then there's an alphabet card deck as well. And I would encourage you also to go on the internet, and there's lots of different examples and games to play that can help you encourage all these kind of this kind of development. All right. Are we good with this section, helping your child with speech, sounds, and letters? Are there any questions?
Just one comment in the chat. You can do two different ways that game. You can look for the sound of the letter F, or you can look for the letter,
Correct.
surroundings.
Excellent point. Yes, because it's kind of the learning the alphabet part, and there's also the sound awareness and combining them both. But yes, definitely it can have two different purposes, which makes it an especially fun game to do. And you can learn your colors too. I see something green, which is pretty broad because there's lots of green things, but that's but you can do different things with it. All right. Book reading. So talking about books with your child. So this is, again, it incorporates everything we've talked about, talking with your child, learning the sounds of letters and words and things. But in addition, in book reading, you see that pictures stand for real things. You learn that print tells a story, that there is a purpose, learning all these letters and the letters combined together to create words, which create a story. It also you find new ways to say different things. And again, learning the vocabulary words is critical because, again, if you don't know the words, you can't comprehend what you're reading. So you have to be able to, the broader you can make a child's vocabulary, the better. But there are a few points here. So there's lots of chances to learn when sharing books. And, you want to ask questions about this in the story to stretch their understanding, which we're going to get into. So this is kind of the beginning. All right, so we're going to next talk about different tips for talking about books. So tip number 1 is talk about what you both see in the pictures. Name the colors, the shapes, the objects, whatever you see. And I would say this goes back to the thick conversations that we talked about earlier. Expand on your child's responses by adding more words. For example, yes, it's a big red fire truck. And you can ask your child to repeat what you said. And can you say that? Can you say, yes, it's a big red fire truck? So they can get a chance to practice the words as well. And like I said earlier, you don't want to point out errors. You just want to expand or repeat. And it's like if they say the word burn instead of brown, you say, that's right, it's a brown cocoon. So you can make it so it's a positive experience, but really you want to expand what they see to increase the vocabulary in what you're doing. Tip number 2, talk about what is happening in the story. So this is really important because then again, you expand on what they see. You can talk about it, how it relates to what is going on in their life, in your life, and everything. So you can see, expand on what they might know and everything. So that's helpful. Guess what might happen next in the story? And this kind of helps. And you can also talk about what's happened before, and you can see all these things, and you're guessing what might happen in the story can help with comprehension. But it also kind of expands the thinking, talking new words and figuring out what might go on. So you're more engaged and involved in what you're reading. And then tip number 4, and this is what I just said, make connections between the book and your life or what you know, so that you can, again, so that it's called funds of knowledge. So when a child reads something, the more funds of knowledge they have, which they can draw from their background, from what they've read, from what they learned, the better later on their reading comprehension will be. So you want to increase and make their funds of knowledge larger. And you have to also think about your own, as a parent, your own funds of knowledge that you can kind of contribute and help them learn more about what they're reading. So that's really important. So when you talk about books with your child, you may encounter some challenges when you talk when you're doing this. And if, for example, if you speak one language and all the books you have are in another language. So maybe choose books with pictures and talk about what you see. And one type of book, which is really good if you're working with parents and a parent may struggle with reading themselves, is wordless picture books, because they can then look at the pictures and have a great conversation and make up the story as they go along and what they want to do. And it just kind of furthers the story, increases conversation, does vocabulary, and you want to encourage them to do it in their own language and what they're doing. It's not all about learning different languages, about supporting English. You want to support the languages of both English and whatever their native language is. But again, so if you have challenges, talk about the pictures, point out familiar objects of what you see, and use your, like I said, use your imagination to make up a story. So if you can't, if the words, don't make sense or they're in another language, just make up your own story. That's what makes it fun. And have your child make up a story and what's going on. All right, so now we go, this is kind of ties in with it all, is book reading. And a lot of this kind of just is saying what we said before. So you learn new sounds, words, ideas from it. When you're book reading, you link letters to the sounds. And this is, again, what we talked about, which is important. So you see the relationship between the sounds of what you speak and the letters you see on the page. You learn how books work, that they're, front to back, and you turn pages. And it's important to let the child do that. You can help hold the book together, but let the child do a lot of the kind of the behaviors and what it is all involved with reading. And you can develop an interest in reading as well, kind of get some stories, and the more interest in reading it is, the better. Sometimes you need to pick books that your child will be interested in. For example, sometimes boys tend to like more informational books. Girls, tend to like more of the stories and things, but that may not always be true. But there has been research on that. So, you find the interesting book that you want to read. So when you're going to get ready to read, these are important things. You find a quiet, cozy spot so you both can listen and talk. You let your child pick a book or choose one that matches his or her interests. And of course, you may reread a book 1,000 times, it seems like, but that helps them become familiar with it. And they can also, then when they want to read the book on their own, they know what the book is about and the stories, and they can read it and, pretend to read, which is all good. And you follow your child's lead and keep it fun. It's all good. If you're working with children that may be challenging and don't want to sit and listen, and it's a very kind of always, you feel like they're not paying attention. Sometimes, they are. You again, follow your child's lead, that you could still talk to them and have conversations if they may seem distracted, because quite often they are listening. Or if you feel they can get really distracted, find a really quiet place that not near a window, which can be distracting if there's noises. Or don't be sure to not watch with the television on. There's lots of different ways to kind of, channel your child's interest, and the distractions are diminished, which can be really important. And this is often true of autistic children who may have more challenging time sitting still and reading, or even, ADHD kids too. So, so think about where might be a good place to have a quiet place to read. Sharon, are there any questions, or are we good? Or if anyone has questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat.
Right now, we are good. I don't see any other comments.
Okay, I'm moving right along here. So, okay. So when you're reading with your child, there are lots of tips for reading. And these are, the good ones. Read pictures, words, or use audiobooks. And again, this is what I said before, label objects around the house and read them too. If your child happens to be dyslexic, audiobooks are a really good way to do it, because they're getting the comprehension, and the frustration of reading is less likely to happen, because often it's just more frustrating because the words are more jumbled up. Read and talk about the good book together. Again, make it interactive. Have a conversation. Use those thick conversations. Make it fun. You can always, if you want to have an activity after you read it, you could say, end the story and say, well, let's now talk about, let's draw a picture of what we think might happen next, and so you can do different things and then have them talk about what they drew. So there are lots of ways to extend the reading, to make it interactive. So it's important to kind of keep that interest and foster that understanding of the book, because again, that gets to, for the older kids, gets with comprehension, which we want to work with. But also the interactive piece, again, it helps you learn new words, and it gets the conversation back and forth. They learn the skill of conversation and listening and things like that. And then you read and talk in the language and you and your child feel most comfortable. That's very important, because children can learn two languages at once without a problem, and they'll move forward. And you can also, and it helps for everybody to learn the two languages, but it's good to read in what you're most comfortable with. All right. So when you're reading, again, make it interactive. Interactive reading engages your child by having her discuss the story or narrative. So we're going to watch another video. Let's hope I can do this right. There it is. All right. We're going to share the screen, and I'm going to go to this video. Where are we going? All right. So
early literacy skills. During interactive reading, an adult reader uses a variety of techniques to engage a child or group of children in the text. Interactive reading engages children in a story by having them discuss the narrative and images in the book. The reader might ask children to point to the title, point to the words and pictures in the story, make predictions about what might happen in the book based on the cover or story so far, or retell the story in their own words. Interactive strategies get children talking and engaged in the story. Follow-up questions encourage students to expand their responses and express their ideas.
all right. Oh, I almost. All right. 1 second. Okay. Are there any questions after that? I mean, the interactive reading is really important. It is, and it, parents have been told all along, read to your child, read to your child, read to your child. And it really is more about the quality rather than the quantity of books. So if you have to spend more time reading one book, interacting, asking questions, engaging in conversations, talking about new words, that is better than reading 5 books where you just read it all the way through, because it's the talking and the conversation that encourages the complex thinking and the learning of new words. So that's important to remember, to really make it a quality reading time with your child. All right.
I don't know if anyone else got really tired of reading the same book over and over when their kids were little, but I did. And so
Yes.
I eventually realized that I could just let her tell me the story. And so that worked well for her language development, as well as, imagination and memory. I mean, she really remembered things so well and could really elaborate on each page, even as a little one.
That's a really good point. And it allows them to practice the vocabulary that they are learning and that you've been talking about. So yes, that is fantastic to just, after you've read it, 20 times, let them begin to tell the story, and then maybe say, hey, what ifs? What if the character, whatever the character is, does something else? What do you think would happen in the story if that did? So you're making a different kind of prediction based on kind of going in a new way with the story once you've read it 20 times or so. But it's a lot of fun things, because then it can go in different directions. What if Little Red Riding Hood never met the wolf and met a raccoon instead? What might have happened? So I mean, you can just do lots of fun things with the stories when you're reading. All right, thank you, Sharon, for that extra. That was good. All right, so again, we're back to asking questions when talking about our reading books. And I kind of keep going over the same things because all these ideas are really important, and all of them are so intertwined. And what we talk about for just the fundamentals of learning to read and write before kindergarten, first, second grade, because once the children hit third grade, instead of learning to read, they're reading to learn. And that's a really important point to make. So you want to get the foundation and the fundamentals so that they're reading with ease and not trying to figure out what they're reading. So it's kind of a fundamental piece. So when you're asking questions, you think about things in new ways, like we were talking about, the what if you do a story in a different direction, it makes it kind of going in different ways. Consider new words and ideas. It helps, you can have them explain their thinking and have them new words. And that's really good because you're not telling them, are you thinking this? You're saying, well, what are you thinking? Why do you think that? What makes you think that that happens? Kind of expand on that whole idea. If you see a picture, what do you see here? And what makes you think that? Why do you think that the characters are doing this? And so you can really stretch and make a story a learning process instead of, just breezing your way through it. It's really important to spend that time. And again, it makes sense of the letters, sounds, and words and what's going on. So when you're asking questions, ask questions, again, to make it interactive. And what you want to do is avoid questions that are yes, no answer, because what we're talking about is open-ended questions where it could be, and the answer could go in any directions. Now, what color is the truck? Is red. That's kind of a yes or no answer. You want to have, a question of where do you think the truck is going? So it's allows them to think. They have to kind of relate words, try to think of what where would they think a fire truck is going? And try to relate the stories to situation in your child's life, again, to have that funds of knowledge when they're later on in reading. And use the tips we discussed for thick conversations. Ask those, ask your child the WH questions, because that, again, it allows it to expand. Give new information about the topic and repeat all or part of your child's answer to encourage him to say more. So all of these things will help the questions and help the ideas and the thinking going on. So you're going to get something related to what's called dialogic reading, and that is an interactive reading ability, and interactive and where it asks questions. So these are kind of 5 points if you think of the crowd idea to help you remember the different kinds of questions to ask when you're engaging in the book reading and what's happening. So we have C is for completion, R is for recall, O is for open-ended, WH is for the prompts, and D is for distancing. So let's talk a little bit more about each. So we have completion. So when you ask your child to fill in the blank, you use words from the story, and after it's repeated several times or it becomes very familiar. So let's say after you've read it 10 times, you can say, and the caterpillar turned into a beautiful, so then the child fills in the words. It can be, do this once they're really familiar with it. And it's a great idea for completion of sentences, for learning vocabulary words, and things like that. Then we have recall. So you asked your child to tell you what happened in the story. And again, we're talking about asking questions and but the purpose of the recall is also to help them with comprehension, which is a skill we want to do, because they need to be able to, when they read to learn in third grade, this will be something that is important, is the comprehension piece. So can you tell me 2 foods the caterpillar ate? You can do this after the story, or when after you've read about that. It just depends how it all fits in together. The open-ended questions we just talked about, ask what is happening in a picture or story to get them talking. Tell me about the caterpillar. Why do you think the caterpillar was so hungry? And so, they didn't eat, but I mean, you can expand upon it, add new words. What kind of food do you think the caterpillar would want to eat? So it can just kind of make those open-ended questions to get them thinking. The WH prompts we've talked about. Ask your child who, what, when, where, and why. What are their foods? And I just said it. What other foods might a caterpillar eat? Where does a caterpillar turn into a butterfly? Why do you need to eat? So there's all these questions of the WH, which are really can expand upon what you've read. And then distance. Ask your child to connect to something in their own life. What do you think would happen if you ate that much? You know, do you think, you know, do you think the caterpillar will be still be hungry? So you just kind of add the whole crowd piece, and it's kind of a good way to, as a reminder of how or what different kinds of questions you can ask while you're reading to your child. All right. Has anybody tried the crowd idea or other, you know, the dialogic reading? You will again have a link to a dialogic reading piece, so that should be helpful if you're not familiar with it. But it's again that quality piece rather than quantity piece of reading together. Okay. All right. So asking questions when talking about or reading books. And so when you ask these questions, it's really good to do it before, during, and after reading. Again, because of the skill development of learning to read and write involves all of these pieces. So if you do before reading, this is kind of what you predict might happen in the story. And it helps kind of it allows the complex thinking, you know, look at the cover and talk about what, you know, what the story might be about. And that'll help kind of give an idea. So if you saw, you know, Hop on Pop, it's a rhyming book, but what do you think the story's about? Even though it's kind of an odd story. But I mean, there's lots of different ways, you know, to do it in different pictures. The picture books can provide some fun ideas. During reading, ask your child about letters, sounds, words. Ask all those questions we talked about with crowd. You know, can you find a letter in your name? Can you say the word that sounds like a bat? Those are called closed questions, not the open-ended, but here's an open-ended. What would happen if your friend wanted to play with your toy? Why is the boy sad? So there's so many different questions that you can look at the pictures, and really that'll help you kind of further and foster the questions that you have. You know, and so it kind of helps during the reading again to make that quality reading. And then after reading, and again, this helps with the comprehension piece. You know, ask your child what happened in the story, make connections to your real life and what happens with them and that you know about. What was the story about? What does the story remind you of? What did you like about the story? What didn't you like about the story? You know, what do you think might happen to the character if? You know, there's always so many different ways to go on. And there's another way to continue at the after reading is, like I said before, is have kind of an activity to do that's based on the story. You know, if you have a story about making a journey, then they could draw some sort of map or draw where they might end up after the journey. So there's lots of different ways to continue it and make the reading. It's not just about reading the book. So if you do a story time in the middle of the day, then you can have them have an activity afterwards. Or practice their letter writing or something like that, because all of it fits together. All right. Here are two of the resources I talked about. The process of dialogic reading, which kind of gives some ideas about the interactive reading piece and having it talking together. And then route to reading, helping your child see the journey's end, which is a lot about comprehension and seeing the end, what to do at the end of the book and things. So are there any questions so far?
There aren't any questions right now in the chat. I did add another fun rhyming book, The Wonky Donkey. You familiar with that one?
No, I don't know that one.
Oh, you've got to look that one up. It is hysterical. Hysterical.
Yeah, there are some really good books that are fun.
The fun part of that one is that it's so hard to read because it's a tongue twister and it just bounces back and forth with rhyming words. So it just makes you just dissolve into peals of laughter, you know. So everybody is laughing before you get through the book. It's just
that's great. Yeah, and that reminds me when you said tongue twister, that's another really great way to learn the speech sounds of letters and things and to make up your own tongue twisters or to say tongue twisters. because they can be hysterical. And if sometimes you don't know any tongue twisters, you can always go on YouTube and Google tongue twisters, and they have, lots of opportunities for it or for practicing it. I know I'm providing a lot of written resources, but there are also YouTube has a lot of videos about a lot of these things, videos about dialogic reading, videos about, phonological awareness. So it's, there are a lot of really great resources out there to use, but these are fundamentally, relate to what I've been talking about. All right, so basically there are 4 key ways to support your child's literacy development. It's listen, look, help, and encourage. And what does that mean? So listen. So when you're listening, you know which sounds, letters, words, or ideas seem hard for your child when reading or talking. And that's something to really pay attention to, because if they're struggling in certain ways, they're struggling with phonological awareness, they're struggling with things, and then that could be many different indications, and you might want to talk to someone about getting testing or something. A lot of children have dyslexia, and it's fine. It's just a matter of, if you know your child has dyslexia, to be able to know how to support them better in school, and what you need to do, and what are ways to encourage and support their learning and reading and writing when they have dyslexia. It's not always found in there when they're early in preschool. My daughter has dyslexia. We didn't figure it out until high school. So if you see they're struggling at any time, it's kind of pay attention to what's going on. Doesn't mean there's a problem, but then you can talk to the teacher about better ways to support them, or connect to the preschool teacher and say, okay, I see they are having trouble with this, their sight words or with their letters. Can you give me things to do to help them practice these things? So again, watch for skills or tasks that appear difficult. See if they improve with practice. And this is, again, talk to the teacher. Pause and give your child a chance to correct a mistake. You don't always have to fill it in for them. They can maybe figure it out, or just say, are you sure that's right? And give them a chance to figure it out, or a hint to help them figure out what the problem is, because, they may not be aware that maybe something they did may not be quite right. And again, talk with your child about the book. Are often praise when they're successful, reassure him or her when the difficulties arise, because they often happen. Not every kid's going to get all this very easily. And again, doesn't just happen developmentally, as so many, kids learn to walk and to run, and that's a developmental skill that happens naturally because it's part of, who we are. But learning to read and write doesn't happen naturally. We have to be there to support them and teach them. And you as a parent can be there to be their support. You need for the parent engagement piece. And if you feel that, you can't do it on your own, you need to talk to a teacher or somebody to help you find ways to support them. And it's important to advocate for your child when you think something might be going on. So it's yeah. And here, any questions? I breezed through that information pretty well. I hope it was, helpful. And again, NCIL has so many different resources. And I'm going to show you the next brief, but please ask questions. This is their bigger brief about supporting your child's literacy development at home, which is an infographic and provides lots of great information. So that concludes my next slide is the survey. So are there any questions that I can help you with?
I did drop the link to the survey in the chat box. If you all wouldn't mind, go ahead and click on that so that you can complete the survey while we talk.
Yes, please do that. Yes.
That'll be helpful. The NCIL website is really good and has a lot of great resources there. So try to take a little bit of time and just peruse the website and see what you come up with, because it's really good and has information for all ages and everything. So it's very good. I wanted to plug audiobooks too, Dr. McLean. I'm an audiobook freak. I'm in the car for about an hour and a half to 2 hours a day.
Yes.
And so I listen to my audiobooks, and so I go through over 30 books a year just listening, through that. I'm also going through, my daughter is almost 11 now, and so we listen to audiobooks together, and that's how
Right.
that's our nighttime routine. I go and lay on the bed with her, put my phone on with an audiobook, and then we talk about it. And, she'll say, "Oh, I think I know what's going to happen," or "I think I
Oh,
know,"
see? Yep.
So, just a lot of fun things that come with that for an older age, which we'll talk about later in another one of our literacy series. I'm jumping the gun, but,
Yes, yes. Yeah, and I often, actually, when we went on long car trips, I would read, again, when they're older, I would read a book to them. We were reading Harry Potter together. And I'd often say, okay, no movie until we've read the book, which wasn't always as popular as you'd think. But again, I think audiobooks are wonderful, especially if your child's struggling with reading a little bit, and it can get them used to comprehending and learning and reading things and the fluency and things. So, but yes, we will talk about this in the elementary, supporting your child's literacy development.
it's also kind of cool to find books that have characters who may struggle.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with the Rick Riordan series, the Percy Jackson series, kind of a fantasy series, but I love it.
Yes.
Tons of books, and they're upper elementary, maybe
Yep.
closer to middle school, but younger kids could listen to them. I mean, they wouldn't be reading them, but the Rick Riordan has a son who is dyslexic, and so he would tell him bedtime stories, and his friends kept saying, you need to write these down. And so he wrote them down. The thing that he did was he made the characters in his book, they're demigods. So they have a parent who is a Greek god or Roman god,
Right.
and a parent who is just a regular earthling, a regular human. But so all of the demigods have some sort of a reading issue, dyslexia,
Okay.
because their mind is grounded in Greek or whatever, and so
Right.
they're dyslexic. In their regular life, they're usually dyslexic. They have ADHD, and all of that is because they're
Yep.
demigods. So they're super, they're like the heroes of the books, the main characters, but they also have dyslexia and ADHD. So that's really, I thought that was very cool to learn that little backstory about the books and how they were written, and because his son has dyslexia.
That's really great. Yes. And I think that's a good point, because sometimes children need the characters that relate to who they are. And it's better for them to understand, oh, this person's like me. And so they can really understand it. And there's also books called social stories, which can kind of give examples if a child is struggling with a behavior or something else. A social story can teach a lesson about how to behave or how to make friends or how to do other things. So there's all different kinds of stories that can really support your child depending on, what they may be interested in or what they may need. So it's good to look for different ideas. But I totally agree with you, Sharon, that it's a good idea to if a child is struggling in any way, to find a story that they can relate to and understand, and go, yeah, that person's like me. Oh, I'm not alone, sort of thing. So yes.
Anyone have any other comments, tips that you have from your own experience? We have some early childhood people on today, some Head Start and early childhood folks. So I'm excited about that. But if you have any comments, now's the time to drop those in the chat or open your mic. And of course, go ahead and be filling out that little questionnaire for Dr. McLean.
Yeah, here's the survey if you need to type it in but yeah.
But we really appreciate you being here today. This has been really great. I love reading, and I love literacy topics and encouraging others to read, because it really does open up a whole world.
Yes.
And most of us here are here because we either have a child with a disability or we work in that, in that community with people with disabilities, and literacy is so important. And a lot of our kids struggle with reading. They may be non-readers, and they may be readers who stay on a kindergarten or first grade level,
Right.
for the duration. But literacy is important, and there are still ways that we can encourage the development of those skills.
Yes, I agree.
Hey, Sharon,
Yes. Hey,
this
Sissy.
is Hey, I just want to say that the part that you talked about with the picture books with no words,
Mhm.
and for those who do speak another language, because I do. I'm a birth to three person. I work in early intervention. I do, and I evaluate and I do observations on teachers. But that is a great point. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I do work with a lot of families who do not speak, a
Right.
parent does not speak English. And those books are wonderful. So when I'm working with the child and the interpreter that comes with me, since I'm not fluent in Spanish, um, that they come in handy. And I love that you mentioned that, because those are so needed in classrooms as well for children who are speaking, and the audio books for our nonverbal children and who are our children who have sensory um,
Right.
things going on. I'm so thankful I got on here and that you mentioned both of those things, because those are super important for our kids who have some challenges. So thank you so much. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're welcome. I mean, I love wordless picture books because I work in family literacy programs, and the people, the families, either the adult doesn't speak English very well, or they have a literacy need themselves. So they also cannot read a children's book very well. So when they're really in the beginning and they're just learning, then the wordless picture books are perfect, because part of family literacy is the parent-child interaction and the parent supporting the child's literacy development. So they are a really good start for a lot of these parents. And then if they're learning English, or they're learning their own, learning how to read and write, children's books are also really good for them to practice their own skills. So in these families, it's not only the child who's learning to read and write, but the parent is also reading and write. So they're simultaneously learning together, which is a really great opportunity for them both. So I completely agree with the wordless picture book idea. I love them. So thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. Thank you. This has been great.
Great, thank you. I'm glad.
All right. Are there any resources to help with literacy for autistic children in particular?
I recently, I'm sorry, I don't have the resource up there, but there are resources about how to read to autistic children and to help with the challenges of reading with them. And so I think that's a good avenue to do, is to find articles in that. But a lot of it is, I mean, it's still reading and writing. It's just I mean, it's still reading, but it's how to kind of channel their energy or their what's going on. So to just kind of get them to listen to read and write. So I'm afraid I didn't think to put on a resource for that. I apologize.
I know oftentimes if with kids on the spectrum who may be zeroed in on a particular item or a particular,
Topic.
like they love trains, you can go to the library and find books on trains, and
Right.
just read about trains, and nonfiction as well as fiction books, Thomas the Tank Engine, whatever. But try to use as much as possible what the child is interested in. When you
Yep.
do that first, then you may get a lot more interest um, in the reading.
And I think that's true of non-autistic children too,
Absolutely. It's true for me.
is channel to their interests. And it might be hard to figure out because maybe their interests are huge and wide spectrum, but I just try to talk to them, or if they express some sort of interest or something, then kind of, like you said, go to the library, find a book, find a wordless picture book or something that is in that topic, and go from there. So, but I totally agree, because the autistic child may have a very focal interest in something, and you really want to capitalize on that when you're reading with them, for sure.
And she also said, really appreciate the suggestions because it's been a struggle. Lauren, how old is your child? About to turn 3.
Okay. Yeah. And that's But again, even just talking and finding the interest, yeah, and the conversations are as important for all children. So, you know, I mean, yes, you kind of have to figure out what works best in the whole behavior and the interest and everything, but still just read to them, you know, just kind of, that's what's really important.
A part of, part of it is also making things available. I was telling Dr. McLean before we started the webinar, my daughter, when she was a baby, she had access to one shelf. Everything else was a no-no because that was mama's stuff. But the one shelf at the very bottom was her books, and she could access those anytime she wanted to. So just having those accessible made her interested in them. So making things easily accessible to a child, using audiobooks, using things that are of interest to them. Also, I know a lot of kids on the spectrum have issues with this, face to face.
Right.
So don't try to make them sit and do reading, especially at that age. But you can read while they're playing with blocks, or read while they're lining up their cars, or something. But just for them to see you reading a book, they will understand that you are reading the book, and that will
Right.
start to make sense at some point.
Right.
And hopefully it will increase their interest in also reading the book.
I'd agree. And choice is important for all children, but also, for autistic children, so that they know they can pick what they want to do, and then the interest is there. So if you do have a shelf of your own books, then, put a variety of different things, several books of different topics that they're interested in, so that they'll, whenever they are interested in that moment, they'll have something available for you to read. And I think it'll get a little bit easier as your child gets a little older. They'll be able to make the choices a little bit better for them.
And even, I'm just brainstorming while you're talking, but even laying out on the floor 3 different storybooks and just picking one up. I think I like this book, and reading that book, and then putting it down when you're finished. And maybe, at some point the child will come pick up a different book, or go find a different book for you to read. They're always listening. They're always taking things in, whether or not they are a speaker or a non-speaker,
Right.
whether or not they can attend to you while you're reading, they're listening and they're soaking it in.
I would agree. And I think sometimes, again, that whole stereotype, you need to be sitting in my lap or sitting next to me to listen to the reading, isn't really true. I mean, if they're kind of bouncing around, they are listening. I mean, they're still listening to what you're saying. Maybe one night they're totally just drawing on the floor or whatever they are in there, but they're still listening to the story. So I would completely agree that don't worry about the stereotypical view of reading to your child. You got to do what's best for you. It's the reading that's the important part. It's good to have them sometimes listen and be there with you, but it doesn't have to be all the time.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you again, Dr. McLean. We're looking forward to the other, I don't know if everyone knows, but this is the first in a series of 3 webinars on literacy for children. This one was for preschool age. The next one will be May 1st, also at 10 a.m. It's a Wednesday at 10 a.m. That one will be supporting the literacy of your elementary age child. And then on May 22nd, also a Wednesday at 10 a.m., we will be supporting the literacy of your adolescent age child. So please go ahead and register for those. They're up on our website. Would love to have you all join us again for those as well. And tell your friends who may have children who are in those age groups that we'll be doing those.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be Dr. McLean for the other 2 as well.
Yeah.
So we know we're going to get quality. All right. Well, Dr. McLean, thank you so much. For everyone else, I hope you stay safe in this weather. It has been raining. It has been raining cats and dogs the whole time we've been on.
Wow.
So I was able to hang on till the end with power and internet. So anyway, y'all have a great day. Don't forget to complete the questionnaire for us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.